Whoa, look, Mr. Sneezy is already sneezing it out. Boy, this is just what I want to see in the morning. I'm Dan, and I've been designing kitchen gadgets for 40 years. I'm going to test some breakfast gadgets and see if I can find a way to make them better. We'd want some sort of half dome here, increasing the angle of this wall, a little bit bigger head. These are the products I'm going to test. Bagel guillotine slicer, Mr. Sneezy egg separator, the Never Soggy cereal bowl, one-click butter stick cutter, masticating slow juicer. Bagel guillotine slicer. Its purpose in life is to quickly slice a bagel safely and in one easy move. Let's see how effective it is. We've got a New York-sized bagel and I guess a Midwest-sized bagel slicer. We're a little stuck. What do you think? Give it a squeeze? Boy, it's not going willingly. Okay, it is squeezed in there. Let's see if we can turn this into 2 bagel halves. And actually it presses in pretty quickly and easily. So that part of it was pretty easy. Let's see if I can pull out. The slices want to come out, but that's okay. It kind of looks like a toaster. And they are sliced pretty nicely, and the result's pretty good. The problem is the size may not fit every bagel you own. Let's assume you don't have a bagel guillotine slicer at home. Let's compare it to a bread knife. On a scale of 1 to 5 for effectiveness, I would give the bagel guillotine slicer a 4. I would give it a 5, but I'm from New York, and there's no sense having a big bagel if you have to squeeze it down to cut it. Now I'm going to try the left-handed oil test. Making my non-dominant hand slippery is a quick way to highlight any deficiencies. And let's remove the hood. See how well this bagel squeezes in. This one fits a little better. Get on top, press down, takes a little bit of force. I may actually want to use both hands to do this, but coming out, I've got a well-sliced bagel. Not a whole lot of pinching or grabbing. It really is just some downward force on this handle. The handle's pretty sizable. Just need to line it up and apply that pressure. The bagel's a little hard. You may need both hands to get down on it, but the blade actually is cutting pretty well. And the shape of the blade, starting with this point to get things started, is pretty effective. So yeah, I think it's working. In terms of usability on a 1 to 5 scale, I would give it a 4. Again, it loses a point because I'm from New York, and we have oversized bagels here, which would have to be squeezed down. Let's think about a redesign, see if I have any thoughts on how to improve this. So I'll trace pretty quickly. I think I'd question whether this handle up top wants to be rounded like this. I mean, have this arc to it, as opposed to being flat or even having a small arc in the other direction. That would keep hands centered as you do this. My biggest complaint is that it's not easy to pick up because there's nothing holding the top to the bottom. So if you're going to store it somewhere or put it on a shelf and grab it off of a shelf, especially a high shelf, I think it's just going to fall apart. If this is the base, I think what I would do is flare out the base a bit so that fingers have somewhere to go. Just give it a little more surface area. And that, in addition to magnets on this end and in the base, strong enough just to hold this so that when you pick it up, the 2 halves stay together. I think that would be an improvement. Well, I guess the one other thing is to make this more of a New York bagel size. Come up with a shape in here or maybe some fins or something that would accommodate different size bagels, but be a little bit larger so that it will fit a New York size bagel, which means a real bagel. So in terms of a buy rating, I would give this a 4.5. I am willing to forgive the fact that it doesn't quite fit a New York bagel. Good job, bagel guillotine cutter. Mr. Sneezy egg separator. It is a rather disgusting way to separate the yolk from the white of the egg. Let's give it a shot. Egg number 1 into Mr. Sneezy. Got a little bit of a shell in there, but we'll just go with it. And I'll try the second one. Whoa, look, Mr. Sneezy is already sneezing it out. Let's say you have a cholesterol problem and you never want to eat eggs again. I would suggest Mr. Sneezy because I can't think of anything I would rather not eat at this point. I still have some egg white inside of Mr. Sneezy's head. Oh, there it goes. You got to jockey the egg yolks around a little bit. And I think, let's see how much egg white is left in the bowl. Not too bad, it's mostly yolk. On the other hand, I don't think I'm going to eat eggs for another week and a half. Let's compare Mr. Sneezy with the traditional eggshell method. In In terms of effectiveness, I would give Mr. Sneezy a 4.5. He is disgusting but effective. It's time for the left-handed oil test. There's not a whole lot of work or pressure involved in doing this, so to crack an egg with my left hand. Oh, yes, Mr. Sneezy is already dribbling. Come on, Mr. Sneezy. Well, boy, there's no pressure involved, and the curves are okay. It's not like it's going to slip out. There's enough flare at the top of his head that I don't feel insecure at all about using a slippery left hand on Mr. Sneezy. I'm going to give it a little bit of assistance here. In the interest of time, I'm just going to stop there and see what we have. Not bad separation between the egg whites and the yolks. In terms of usability, I would give Mr. Sneezy a 4. It's a lot of entertainment value. Let's talk redesign of Mr. Sneezy. I know what you're thinking. How can you possibly improve on Mr. Sneezy? I'm not sure how I can. I think the one thing I would recommend, Mr. Sneezy has to have a little bit bigger head. I think it needs to be redesigned so that it could hold 2 jumbo-sized eggs so that he doesn't start dribbling out his nose immediately. Aside from that, I gotta say, Mr. Sneezy, I think you're almost perfect. Thank you, Dan. In terms of a buy rating for Mr. Sneezy, I would give him a 5 out of 5. Now, in saying that, I would give Mr. Sneezy away as a present. I'm not really sure I want to see Mr. Sneezy every morning. If you were a kid and grew up with Mr. Sneezy in your kitchen, I don't think you'd forget it. Never soggy cereal bowl. Its purpose in life is to keep the milk and the cereal separated until you're ready to eat it to prevent unwanted sogginess. So here's what we have. Cereal compartment, milk compartment, root for the cereal to fall into the milk. We have cornflakes. And I'm gonna pour in the milk. Now the question is, do the bananas go in the cereal part or do they go in the milk part? This is a question that everyone really needs to answer for themselves. Now, of course, the bananas are waterproof, so they really don't need to be up here. And time for the cereal to enter the milk. And boy, if I'm really gonna be careful about sogginess, I'm just gonna do a little bit at a time. It is definitely crunchy. It's only been in there for about 30 seconds, so it should be crunchy. I've never experimented to see how much time it actually takes for cornflakes to get soggy. But I think if you own this, what you would want to do is gradually introduce the flakes into the milk. I'm holding this. Is actually a rather easy way to hold this if you wanted to walk around your kitchen or your house eating cereal. As you can see, it's pretty easy to walk around with it. Not only is it stable in my hand, but it's deep enough that I feel like it's not going to spill as I walk around with it. Boy, the only complaint I would have is, do I like soggy cereal? And I actually like soggy cereal. Let's compare that to the more controversial method of pouring cereal into the milk a little bit at a time. That worked. In terms of effectiveness, I would give it a 5 out of 5. It separates the cereal from the milk, and that's not rocket science, but it does so pretty effectively. Let's test its usability. I will oil things up, carefully pour in the cereal. Some of it's slipping out. It's okay. I will live with that. I'll pour in the milk. And really what it comes down to, is there any advantage to using my left hand to scoop in the cornflakes? Oh, let me put in a couple bananas. Again, bananas on top. Sorry, that's the way I was raised. Okay, now left-handed, what that means is you probably, if you want to hold the bowl by hand, you're going to hold it in your right hand. So it really is a two-handed operation. There really is no disadvantage to using this left-handed or right-handed. You're really just holding the spoon. There's no force involved. I'm going to switch hands. Let's say I'm holding the bowl itself with the slippery left hand. Still, it's pretty stable in your hand. And I don't think there's any disadvantage to your right hand or your left hand or a slippery hand. Actually, probably more secure than holding a standard ceramic bowl. In terms of usability, I would give this a 5 out of 5. It really is just a bowl. It's hard to say that it's a difficult thing to use. Let's talk about a redesign. If you look at this angle, the front of the bowl curves down, so it's a little bit shallower here. That's where the liquid is and the milk is. But you notice, in addition to that, this wall is rather straight and this wall is rather curved. It may be a little bit more spillable on the front. I would think about maybe increasing the angle of this wall so that the milk isn't as likely to spill out, especially since this shape encourages you to walk around with it, if this is the level of milk, there may be just a little bit of headroom there. And if it starts sloshing, it may be more likely to spill. In terms of a buy rating, I would give the Never Soggy cereal bowl, I'd give it a 5 out of 5. It does have some sort of playful aspect to it. And I'm not gonna lie, it's hard to critique a bowl. One-click butter stick cutter. Your purpose in life is to pass butter. Now, I know from looking at the instructions how to load this because it's not self-evident. This top pops off, but more importantly, there's a piece in here that needs to be shaken out. That doesn't easily want to come out, but it's this piece, which is the butter pusher. I will load a stick of butter, drop it in, replace that cube. I'll put the top back on, and let's put it to the test. Some pancakes. I will give it a squeeze. Whoa, it's standing on edge. It's not as easy to squeeze because it's got some sharp corners here. It's not very hand-friendly. It took a little bit of effort to squeeze it. This butter is just a little bit cold. It's not super hard. Let's give it another squeeze. Well, in that one, I've got a butter slice that refused to come out naturally. Let's try the third one. So I'm squeezing. So what's actually happening inside is there is a blade. When you push it, the white piece that I showed you pushes the butter down, and as it comes down, it will slice off the butter. And in many cases, as you can see, it'll stick, so you may actually have to persuade it to come off. Notice too that the thickness of the slices seems to be inconsistent. Let's compare it to a butter knife. In terms of effectiveness, I give it a 1 because it is large and difficult to use. It's not very versatile compared to a butter knife. Let's try this again using the left-handed oil test. Boy, I can see my problem right now is getting this off is a little tricky with a slippery hand. I'm going to turn this upside down, and again, I know that I have to wrap it on the table a few times. Okay, it is finally out. Now let's get that new stick of butter in. Going to replace this part, and it's a little tricky, but I got it. And again, we're good to go. Let's give it a squeeze. Whoop, it takes some force to do that, but it's out. It also creates this little divot in the pad of butter. I don't know if that offends anyone's aesthetic sensibilities. Yeah, so I'm not the biggest fan, right-handed or left-handed. In terms of usability, I would give it a 2. I guess it works mechanically. Let's go down to 1.5. There's so much work involved in loading it, and there's gonna be so much work involved in cleaning it. Let me drop that down to a 1, because really a butter knife is so much more effective. They're solving a problem that was never a problem. Okay, let's think about a redesign. And boy, this is a tough one, because I'm not really sure this product has a reason to exist. The reason it's so big is because the stick of butter that's in here is here. The butter itself is not blue, but yellow's not going to show up that well. And the way this operates, the knife is somewhere down here. And so in order to slice this, the entire stick of butter needs to move here, which means you already have something that's almost twice the size of a stick of butter, not to mention the size of the thing that's pushing and the space you need for the blade below. So it's rather large. I would rethink this to the point where maybe the butter lies flat. Let's use some blue butter again. And we'll need some sort of spring pusher here because we want the butter to move forward with every click. So whatever mechanism is up here doing that, we'd have to repeat here. I would opt for this being just about the size of a stick of butter and having some sort of plunger mechanism here that would maybe be like a mushroom cap or something that you would press down on. So it would be stable on the table. You would press down one hand to two hand. The butter would come out this way. You could pick it up and hold it over pancakes or wherever you want to apply the butter. That said, a butter knife works pretty well, so even this would be tough competition. In terms of a buy rating for the one-click butter stick cutter, I gotta give this a 0. I cannot think of one person I know that I would recommend this to. It doesn't save space, it doesn't do nothing. Masticating, slow juicer. Its purpose in life is to make juice out of fruits and vegetables. Let's see how effective it is. I'll pull down this lever. Didn't suction at all that time. Okay, it's not going to be very effective on a wooden base. This part unscrews. And so what's inside is this very spacey looking part that is going to do the masticating. The mesh on the bottom is where the juice will be coming out, and this front nozzle is where the pulp will be expended. I think I'll start with kiwi, which I'm pretty sure is going to be relatively easy. I will start masticating, crank, crank, crank. Okay, now I'm pressing pretty hard with the plunger because I need to get the kiwi out. And I don't know, does kiwi have pulp? If kiwi has pulp, that's what it looks like. When they say it's a slow juicer, I can totally understand what they mean. I think at this point I would have just eaten the kiwi. Let's try some cucumbers. Start grinding. Sounds like something is happening. Boy, since they're both green, it's a little hard to tell the cucumber juice from the kiwi juice, but I think what we're getting out now is cucumber juice. Let's try some apple slices. You would think I'd get a lot more juice now that I'm squeezing an apple, and that may be the case. It's a very slow juicer. It's a very slow process. So I am getting into the apple, but just slowly, slowly, slowly. Let me shove in a handful of spinach. As advertised, this would be good for spinach, kale, or other leafy greens. So let's see how it does on those. I gotta say, not much better. At this point, I'm wondering, did the people who designed this ever try using it? I did get a bit of juice, but man, that took a lot of work. Let's see how this compares to an electric juicer. So electric versus hand crank, you get the idea. Electric seems a lot quicker. In terms of effectiveness, I would give this a 1. I'm just not a fan. It takes so long and so much pressure. Let's try this again left-handed. I'm going to oil up. I'm going to throw in a few things at once. I'm going to throw in 2 slices of kiwi, cucumber, a slice of apple. This time though, I'm going to push down with my right hand. This is really the hand that's doing the work. It's extracting juice at just about the same rate that it did before. But you know, left-handed, I'm not having any trouble cranking. Right-handed, I'm still applying a whole lot of pressure with not a whole lot of result. In terms of usability, I would give this a 0. It takes so much work and so much effort to get the minimal amount of juice out of a kiwi, which is relatively easy to juice. In terms of a redesign, boy, this is going to be a tough one. So one thing I noticed right off the bat is pushing the suction cup down, even if it was a surface that would accept the suction cup, something smooth like a granite surface. This lever is really difficult to operate. I would both extend this lever so it's a little bit longer, you have more leverage, more mechanical advantage on it, and then I would give it a shape so that your hand or fingers are not as likely to slip off of it. The main issue with this that I'm seeing is that this part is not masticating the way you would want it to. It's got tiny little teeth here, so seem to be ineffective and prove to be ineffective. So once you get these bits or chunks of kiwi or apple to ride along here, there are some juicy chunks that are just going to end up being ejected. So here is the tooth, which is actually a 3-dimensional diamond shape, right? It kind of looks like that, but it's only moving in one direction. So there's no reason for this to be symmetric, right? If it's moving in one direction, you would think it would want to do some sort of scooping in that direction. So you think it would want some sort of half dome here, which would pulverize the fruit or the vegetable that you're trying to turn into juice. Secondly, I would take these tiny teeth. They're probably about that size. I would think these things would be much more sizable, right? They really need to carve into that pulp. Boy, I guess one other thing, I have to look inside to what actually is happening here. But you would think here at the very end, and there's actually some shape to this, which I don't think is doing any favors. But this is where, if the pulp finally ends up here, this is where it wants to be squeezed. I would make sure that somewhere along here, having a squeeze action here, so these ribs really need to do some squeezing because you want to, at this point, turn it into juice. For a buy rating, I would give the masticating slow juicer a 0. I cannot think of anyone I would recommend this to. Just make a salad. So if you're making breakfast at home, it really needs to be pretty seamless. You're probably groggy, still half asleep when you're doing it, especially if you have to get out early. We had some winners today, we had some losers. They were all fun to review. Some of them, I think, had a little bit of overthinking to them. Some of them had a little bit of underthinking. In general, it was a pretty good collection of products.